The Entrepreneur's Library, episode 184.
Welcome to the Entrepreneur's Library,
the only book-centric podcast that reviews all the top-selling business books and shares authors' perspective firsthand. This is your resource to finding the next great book
that will enable you to grow personally and professionally.
Welcome your host, Wade Danielson.
Welcome back to the EL. Today we have Marley Majcher, author of But Are You Making Any Money? Stop being busy and start creating cash. Welcome, Marley, and thank you for joining us on the Entrepreneur's Library.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. Before we take a deep dive into your book, will you take just a moment to introduce yourself? Tell us just a little bit about you personally.
Sure. So my name is Marley Majcher, and I have written a book called But Are You Making Any Money? And basically that came out of the need to solve my own problems as a business owner. My core business is event planning. So I currently, because I get this question all the time, I currently run a company called The Party Goddess. And we are event planners in California and handle social, corporate, and corporate events, and then weddings, and travel all over. And basically, I wrote the book to solve my own problems because my business life looked very glamorous, but I was not making any money, which was sort of pathetic because I went to Georgetown, got my degree in business. There's no reason why I shouldn't be able to make money, but I just had such a hard time like making the emotional decisions that I needed to make to run a successful and profitable business. And so I basically started by, I taught a class for my industry convention, because if you taught the class, then you would get to go for free to the convention. I thought, okay, this is awesome. I'm going to teach this class. I'll teach it on my little job costing method that I came up with. At that point, there was no book or anything. It was just this sort of little simple system of basically buckets that I put revenue and expenses in. And then there was like standing room only in the room, and everybody was like, oh my gosh, we want to know more. And I was like, you want to know more about what? Like, I'm the girl that doesn't know how to do it. Like, I just am telling you. And they were like, but you're the only one who's answering these questions. And so from that point, I just would teach every year, and then started, then things develop and you sort of grow a following and people want more. And so that's what I started to do. And finally they were like, well, we want more. What do you have? And I didn't have anything. So then I decided, okay, I'll write the book, which I did. And then now run an online consulting company. So I help small business owners, like myself, and do finance segments for, TV, like Fox or MSNBC, and try to just get the message out that numbers are not that hard, but you just have to know what to focus on.
Excellent. So, Marley, first off, thank you for sharing that. You talked about helping small business owners, and that's a lot of people listening right now. So we might dig into that a little bit right before we depart today, as far as additional ways to get a hold of you if they are in need of your services. But for now, let's jump right into your book. But Are You Making Any Money? Stop being busy and start creating cash, which was made available originally back in January of 2011.
Yep.
And Marley, we're going to move quickly, but our whole goal here today is to cover the top questions that our listener/future reader would like to get answered. And their first question is, what was the inspiration behind writing But Are You Making Any Money?
Well, the inspiration was basically, it came out of frustration, and it came out of the fact that I felt like I had this dirty little secret, which was I had this glamorous business on the outside that everybody thought was great and running really well. And in reality, it wasn't. It was sort of a mess under the hood. And I just didn't know I didn't know who to turn to. I didn't know who to ask. This is years ago. So it wasn't like you could just go on the internet and Google, how to read a profit and loss statement. And so what happened was I just really got frustrated with my dad or my accountant or my husband saying to me, well, how much did you make? Well, how much did you take home? Well, what was on your tax return? All those things were just questions I wanted to run from every time I heard them. And so I thought, I just hate this. Like, there's no reason. First of all, I hate to be afraid of anything. Second of all, something that I love, which is business. And I knew I always wanted to be in business. So I thought, I've got to figure this out, because you just can't run a profitable business if you don't understand your numbers. And I just was allergic to them. So the real watershed moment for me, which I talk about in the very beginning of the book, was a night I was out to dinner with my parents and my then husband, who's the chief financial officer. And and my dad, I was saying, oh, and we're going to do this event and we're going to do this event, all these things we had coming up. And he's like, yeah. Like, that sounds great. He's like, but are you making any money? And I was like, well, he's like, okay, so how much did you make last month? How much did you make last year? How much? And he had all these very, very, very basic questions that I should have known off the top of my head. And I couldn't answer any of them. And I was acting as if like the whole thing was, some complicated deal about depreciation or something, like I was depreciating martinis. I don't know. But it just bugged me that here I was, a smart girl who just couldn't answer basic questions. And that was the watershed moment. And that was really when I decided to kind of call it like I was just done with my own story. I was done saying, I can't wear all these hats, or creative people aren't good with numbers, et cetera, et cetera. And I just thought I got to find a way out. The problem was, as I said before, I didn't know where to turn. So I just started researching and coming up with anything I could. And I really came up with my own little jerry-rig system based on construction job costing and, all these other business models, and sort of wove it into my own that any small business owner can use.
So Marley, you talk about in that subtitle, stop being busy. And that's why this next question I believe is so important, is because there's so many books that come out for entrepreneurs every single month, in the hundreds that come out per month. So what makes your book different from others regarding the same or similar topic?
Well, I think mine is really different for a couple reasons. One, I'm very focused on the small business owner who is already overwhelmed. And quite frankly, we're even more overwhelmed than when my book came out. And I don't talk about, it's very practical. It's practical and it's an easy read and it's deceptively simple. And what I mean by that is it reads sort of like Us Weekly meets the Wall Street Journal. And I'm not trying to dumb it down, but my goal was to sort of lure the reader in and say, listen, come here. It's all like the water's fine. I know you don't love numbers. You don't have to love them, but you have to understand them. And so let me cut through all the baloney, which there is so much out there, whether it's from accountants or financial advisors, all these people that are incentivized basically to have things be complicated and keep you in the dark. And I say, listen, that's baloney. Here's how you do it. And it is literally step by step. And you can apply it whether you have a $200 Etsy business or whether you have, quite frankly, a $5 million business or a $10 million business. The principles are all the same, but I really boil it down to the essentials. And at this point, I've been an entrepreneur for 25 years. I mean, so it isn't as if I don't know what I'm doing, and I've run multiple $1 million plus businesses always, all at the same time, basically since I was 22 years old. So I think it's short, it's to the point, it cuts to the baloney, but it also addresses the piece that I think is really missing in a lot of business books, which is the kind of meet the person where they are. And usually when you go searching for a book like this, you're kind of broken. And this didn't used to be the way, we used to talk about businesses is we have to always have this stiff upper lip for our customers. And that's fine. I think we do. And we have to project that we're totally confident, even if we're paddling like a duck underwater. But I think it's important to acknowledge that it is completely fine to feel frustrated and overwhelmed and burned out and stressed out and not knowing where to turn. And so it's kind of like it becomes sort of part therapy cheerleader almost, but really drills down to the nuts and bolts of this is how to do it. And it is not complicated. It is very, very simple.
With that being said, Marley, how did you design the book, or how do you suggest the reader engage with it? Is this one they can jump in and jump out based on the information they need at that time? Or did you really design it to be read from front to back?
Well, okay. So of course, I'm not going to give anybody any hard and fast rules because I love to make rules and I hate to follow them. Okay. So if anybody's an entrepreneur, even, a wantrepreneur, as you say, they probably don't love rules and being told what to do. That being said, I'm going to tell you what I, would suggest. It's a short enough read that I think if you can read it in, I've been told you can read it in one sitting fairly easily. So it's designed to, the first time, just kind of blow through it and get the concept down. Then after you have the concept and you sort of know my whole system kind of buckets, then you can come back at any point and just focus on four or five pages in a chapter. Then they can be looked at independently. And that's really what I encourage, because the nice thing is, as I say, once you get the basic concept, you can apply it. You can come back to it 5 years from now, and just get a refresher course on it. And because it focuses on timeless principles, which is, where we spend our time and how to make sure we're spending it on the activities that are most important, and really capturing the true cost of doing business. Because 99.9% of people, at least the 99.9% that I've talked to, don't do it, don't have a clue, and really are in the dark about how much time it takes to service their clients. And I come up with a way to get granular about that.
So Marley, now that we know a little of the background and the purpose behind the book, let's take a deep dive into the content itself. And so
Sure.
Will you take the next really 5 to 8 minutes and let this future reader know exactly what they can get out of your book?
Sure. So it's got the introduction and that whole piece, and then it's got 4 sort of groupings. And the reason the introduction is important is because I sort of dispel a lot of things right at the beginning, where I say, listen, I'm not a lawyer, an accountant. I'm not trying to tell you anything to do that any of those highly educated people would do. I'm going to describe to you, as a small business owner, being responsible for and starting multiple small businesses, building them from the ground up, and then helping other business owners with, multi-million-dollar businesses improve. That I give the foundation for here's what I am and here's what I'm not. And then I say, now that we've got that out of the way, let's get down to what you do. And so then you've got these 4 kind of categories of chapters. And the first part is, I call it part 1, is get your bearings. And there are 4 chapters in there, and it's basically elaborates on the foundation, which is, hey, listen, we're all busy, and that is the most annoying answer to me ever, yet it's the one everybody gives. So when you say, oh, how are you? And what does everybody say? Oh, busy, just so busy. And every time I would hear that, which is why my book has a B on the front, I would be like, well, what the hell are you so busy doing? Because if everybody's so busy, and if everybody actually were productive, then guess what? We would all have, houses paid for in cash, and we wouldn't be leasing cars and all these things that we couldn't afford, and we certainly wouldn't have all the credit card debt we have. So somewhere there's a disconnect between all this motion and not a return on our activity. And so then what I do is I have you I call this part, the first part, is really ripping off the Band-Aid. It's getting your longitude and latitude. Because a lot of books talk about how you've got to set goals. And I'm a huge goal setter. I believe in that 1,000%. I do believe every aspect of it, that, SMART goals, they've got to be written and specific and measurable and all that stuff. But to me, that's like saying, hey, listen, I want to go to New York. And that's great. But the question, in New York being the goal, but then the question is it has to be, well, where are you now? Because if you're in LA, you're going to get there one way. And if you're in Greenland, you're going to get there somewhere else. So that longitude and latitude is important. And that's about getting your financial longitude and latitude and really drilling down on where you are and being honest. And this is hard. I mean, it is, because I don't just say, hey, listen, how much is in your checking account? I say not only how much is in your checking account, but how much do you owe your mom, your neighbor, your dad, the credit card companies? What's the interest rate on those credit cards? I mean, that stuff is just, I don't know. To me, at least, is gut-wrenching, coming from the girl who had all kinds of debt and figured it out. And so then at the end of part 1, I really talk about this is why all this is lousy. But here's your way out. You've just got to commit to a new way of thinking, and you can't just put your head in the clouds anymore and say I'm creative or I'm too busy and I don't have time, because you just absolutely can't do that anymore. And so then part 2, I get into the nitty gritty. So the part 2 is where I really walk you through, and I really do walk you through very granularly, setting up a system. And whether you're a service-based business or a product-based business, or you have a combination of both, I walk you through the basics of what cost of goods sold are. And, if you have a dress company or whatever, and you've got to you've got the fabric and the thread and all those things to put the dress out, the cost of goods sold. But when we have service businesses, sometimes we think we don't have cost of goods sold. And so you'll have a masseuse or something who will say, I charge $100 an hour. And if you ask them what their cost of goods sold are, they would say they don't have any. And so I get into the specifics of, we all do, even if that is just, the $1 worth of massage oil or laundering the sheets or driving to see the customer. There is some amount of cost of goods sold. And so when we get really real about that, it doesn't mean that we then say our massages are now $100 and they're now $101 because we have to charge for the massage oil. But what it does is it changes the person's framework, and it gets them to start seeing things very differently. So even the label on a product or even the tissue paper that goes into the bag to wrap it, it doesn't mean I need to charge my customer a line item, like the hotels do, where they say, okay, here's the hotel room and then here's the city tax and the cleaning tax and all those things. But it does mean that you've got to be cognizant of it when you're setting your pricing. And so I walk you through the 4 kinds of expenses and my 4 buckets, A's, B's, C's, and D's. And they are, A's are your traditional cost of goods sold. B's are your time. C's are all those little things like the FedEx that you forgot about or the gas to and from. And then D's are overhead. So by that point in the book, by the time you've completed the 9th chapter, you really hopefully are drinking the Kool-Aid, but you now have a really good foundation for where you are. And you know where you are in your business. You understand the concept by this point about what you've got to do about it. And then parts 3 and 4 are all about putting it into place. So part 3, it has 4 chapters on, okay, now you got to just do it, right? It's enough with the reading and the theory and everything else. Settle down, pull out your pencil and start really coming up with how much it costs to service your clients or produce your product. And you do that by retroactively taking, let's say, 3 of your past products or 3 of your past clients or projects and practicing and coming up with, okay, where could I, and then you come up with ways you can improve. And so you can get as detailed as you want at that point or not. So you can just understand the concept and then move on, or you can really work it like a workbook, which is what I recommend. And then the part 4 is just, okay, now what? Now, how do you put it into place and really use the principles and use them going forward to make a huge difference in your business? And as I said at the beginning of the call, it's deceptively simple. Just to say you've got 4 kinds of expenses, big deal. But it really, really works if you apply it and you sort of go, oh my gosh, I forgot about that. I forgot that every time I go see a client, I have to put $2 in the meter. Well, that's probably not going to bankrupt you, right? But if it's $2 here, or as event planners, who are a lot of my clients, we go and we work in hotels and you tip the car guy and you tip somebody to take the bags up and you tip, when we're working events at certain venues, and you forget about all that, or you forget that you sent the client, every time you send a client gift, again, probably not going to break the bank, but those are C expenses, the forget-me-nots that you've got to consider. So I would say that's a pretty good broad look at the book and what it's about and how kind of the looking at the, from the top of the trees as opposed to down in there in one of them looking at pine cones.
Marley, you did a fantastic job of breaking it down for us. I appreciate you taking the time to really give the future reader a great idea of what it's all about. And this next question I feel like is kind of rude or kind of difficult to answer after everything that you just discussed, because it's asking that if the reader can only take away one concept, principle, or action item out of the entire book, everything that you just shared with us, what would you want that to be?
Well, it's not rude at all, and it's actually very simple. And it is the root of this book, and it's the root of my second one, which is track your time. And that is, your whole life is revealed when you track your time. I mean, I can have somebody turn in, a timesheet of how they spend a week and tell them exactly what kind of problems they're having in their businesses. Because what happens is when you track your time, and you can do it on an app. There are tons of them that I love. I love Paymo. I love T-Sheets. There's any number of them. You can also do it on a piece of paper, in a pencil, a notebook, on an index card, on the back of a napkin. It doesn't matter. It's amazing the excuses people come up with not to do it. But if you track your time, it's like being on a diet, And the way I say it is, I remember I went to my trainer one time and I said, listen, I want to lose 5 pounds. And she said, okay, eat this amount of calories and exercise and blah, 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 and come back. So the next week I came back and I gained a pound. And she said, well, what did you do? And I was like, there's no way. I must be in ketosis. I must be eating my flesh. There's no way. I barely ate. So she said, listen, go write it down. Well, listen, when you write it down, what happens? You realize, oh, fricker, that's right. I ate 10 M&Ms of my son's, and I finished my daughter's half a sandwich, and I had a couple cappuccinos, and they were non-fat, and I had equal, but they still had some calories. And that's where you start seeing, oh boy, that's the problem but you can't see it unless, to me at least, maybe some other people can, but you just can't see it unless you are looking at it in black and white. And when you're looking at it in black and white and it says Facebook, 10 minutes, 10 minutes, and you haven't hit your numbers for the month or the quarter, well, what in God's green land are you doing on Facebook? Unless you genuinely are getting tons of clients from there. But what I find is that we have just so much time that's unproductive. And by tracking your time, then what you do is you just go back in and replace the lowest level activities, like, whether it's checking Facebook or checking email and that kind of stuff, and replacing it with your highest level activity to get your biggest bang for the buck. And the highest level activity, of course, depends on the person and the business, but it's usually things like meeting with customers and, kind of doing that blue sky thinking. And it's just a huge, huge immediate difference. And I think by the time people pick up books like this or go searching, they genuinely are, they are looking for quick, immediate results. And I can't promise that, but I can promise you will get some pretty sweeping changes and find a nice little chunk of change just by doing a couple small tweaks. And, that's what I like in life. And so that's what I try to deliver.
No, that was extremely powerful. Track your time. And yep. I love the example that you gave or relating it to weight loss, because I think a lot of people can relate to that. When you don't track it, it's so easy for those calories to hide in a little bit here, a little bit there. So that was a great example. This is going to go, you said some awesome, track your time is a great quote in my opinion, but do you have a favorite quote from your book? And will you take a second to explain what it means to you?
I would have to say it is what's on the cover, which is stop being busy and start creating cash. And it's just like, close your mouth and just get it done. At some point it's Nike. There's a reason why Nike says, just do it. And, I think I say in here, I'm 99% sure I do. So maybe this would be my favorite one, but it would be about, put your big girl underpants on and handle it. And the reason I say that is because a lot of my audience are women. The book is obviously certainly for men. But it's a lot of times women resonate with it because I really, break it down and get very granular. And I also think I've got another one in there in the third chapter about, busy earning, like a badge of honor with the Boy Scouts. Like a Boy Scout collects patches. That's how we just love to just fly this busy flag. And I think until we start recognizing that it has nothing to do with being busy, it has everything to do with what your return on your time is.
Excellent. And Marley, this next question is a little bit more focused on a book. And obviously as a book-centric podcast, we'd love to get a recommendation, not just any recommendation. We're looking technically for the recommendation. So a book that you would suggest based on the way that it's changed your life, maybe created a lifestyle or a paradigm shift. If that's the case, what book would you recommend? It's
easy. It's The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber. And I think it has hugely impacted my life. It pairs well, and I hate to say that because it's like insulting Michael Gerber, but it pairs well with the concepts, which are, the E-Myth is all about really being the technician and working in your business. We instead of on it, And and it really focuses on, hey, listen, you've got to work on your business. And that's what I'm all about is really continuously. And it's not a one-time thing. And that's why I say take the book and you put it down and you pick it back up, is because it's all about the reminder of coming back over and over and over. It's kind of like when you overeat in the holidays and you realize your jeans are tight and then you go, oh God, I've got to, tidy this plan up a little bit. It's the same thing with business. We all fall off the wagon a little bit, and who cares about 100% perfection? Just go for chipping away and making progress. But you have got to take that time to step back and whether we all get into businesses because we love to bake cupcakes or we love to design homes and be an interior designer or stylist or whatever, but you can't do that and you can't be successful if you don't stop working in your business and instead work on it and really be purposeful about that strategy and all those other components that are so important.
Excellent book, excellent recommendation. So thank you for sharing that. We've actually gotten that one probably, if we tallied it up over the last 184 interviews, that might be one of the most recommended books. But you'd be surprised because we don't just say it has to be a business book. Mm-hmm. We get some really, really different kinds of books. I mean, some are stories, some are, we get all different kinds of books recommended on here. So I love being able to go look at the new ones that I've never even heard of, which happens actually frequently. But Marley, before we depart, can you recommend the best way for our listeners to get more information on you, more information on the business that you provide what you do for small businesses is what I should have said, and also on your book, But Are You Making Any Money?
Sure. Well, the easiest thing is the book you can just find on Amazon. So you just go to Amazon and type in my name, or type in, But Are You Making Any Money? And my last name is spelled kind of funny. It's Majcher. But I did create a little productivity quiz that I think would relate very well to this podcast. And you can take that quiz. It takes about 3 minutes. If you go to theprofitgoddess.com / capital T, capital E, capital L. So I'm sure you can figure out that stands for the Entrepreneur's Library, but theprofitgoddess.com / capital T, capital E, capital L. And then you can also just, that'll take you right to the quiz, but you can also just go to theprofitgoddess.com and you can see kind of more about, what we do and one-on-one consulting and group stuff. And at the end of the day, it's just, I look at it as it's a labor of love. I can certainly make a lot more doing my events and that kind of stuff. But I love this piece of having, where people get clarity and just think, oh my gosh, it makes sense. I get it. So
excellent. Well, thank you for sharing that. Thank you for putting that on as far as the Entrepreneur's Library portion of that. That's fantastic and offering that. And Marley, the biggest thank you of all, thank you for coming on and sharing your, many times we call it a baby because we know how much time that goes into it, time and effort. But thank you for sharing your book with us.
You are very welcome. And also too, I forgot to mention, but I am obsessed with Twitter and Instagram. So sometimes the best places to find me are when I'm waiting for a plane or something. And so oftentimes you can tweet me or Instagram, and that's at The Party Goddess. Kind of another little way to find me.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
You are welcome.
Thank you so much for listening in today. If you'd like more information on Marley or her book, But Are You Making Any Money? Check out the show notes at theelpodcast.com. And as always, if you want an opportunity to win this book, check out theelpodcast.com and become a VIP.
Looking for your next book idea?
Head over to theelpodcast.com,
where Wade shares his amazing resource, the top 10 business books recommended by over 500 entrepreneurs, with you for free.
That's theelpodcast.com.
Till the next time, keep it on the EL.